Hello and welcome back to Read Becca, where my weekly catch up on everything I've read, everything I'm currently reading, and everything I'm looking forward to reading for around the current week. And I have had a good reading week, but it's been very focused on BookTube prize reading, so that's all in a vlog you will see when the round is over in another month and a half. So for now, let's talk what I did finish. I finished Astonishing the Gods by Ben Okri. I love this cover. This was mostly a cover grab at the library, in fact. I was aware of Ben Okri as an author because I had heard of The Famished Road, I think. And he is a Booker Prize winner as well. So very literary, but Famished Road was on a list of like kind of more literary fantasy or fantastical stuff that sounded right up my alley. And so I spotted this because of his name, pulled it out, and loved the cover, so I brought it home. And this was an absolutely wondrous novel. I really, really enjoyed it. This has such a strange sense of the surreal and fantastical without really being grounded in anything. It's not fantastical in that there is spellcasting or anything like that. It's very dreamlike through the entire story, and there's not a lot to hold on to. it's things that you're just kind of moving through a space. This is hard to also talk about because it is quite short, and that dreamlike aspect without kind of a clear narrative means it's very difficult to express what this is about. I think at the simplest level, we're talking about a main character here who is invisible at the start of the book and goes on this journey to seek out visibility. And so it feels a bit like a religious story, that journey does. And I think that's what it's going for. Obviously, the title is Astonish the Gods, but there isn't really a significant religious element to this throughout. It follows kind of a format that reminds me very much of Dante's Divine Comedy. I've only read the Inferno, but I'm assuming the whole thing follows that sort of layout of Dante being on this strange, fantastic journey with a guide and introspecting about things along the way. Pilgrim's Progress even has aspects of that. The Book of Revelation even actually would be a good comp to this, maybe, because we're following this character who is on this mythic journey-ish, and he encounters sort of a spirit guide, I would say. We don't really know it's a spirit, and it seems to be a spirit comparable to him. And everything they encounter is completely strange, and he has to overcome obstacles along his way, and the spirit guide helps him contextualize things, but doesn't give him answers, really. And so this is about grappling with understanding these strange, incomprehensible things that he's being shown by his guide. So that's very like the examples that I gave of other stories. So I think that the grappling along the way is kind of what you have to take away from this, and there isn't a clear answer. And so I think this is very rereadable. For instance, at the beginning, with his being invisible, and he is only seen by other people who are invisible, and he's going on this journey toward visibility. So there is sort of an interpretation there of the individual and seeking oneself and only being seen once you understand yourself. There's some other kind of ties in about loving others versus loving yourself later in the book. There's also the sort of broader interpretation there of like marginalized identities, and that as a person of a marginalized identity, maybe you are only seen by those in your identity who truly understand what you're going through. So I think that is a layered interpretation, and throughout this story, I think you could have dozens of those sort of layered processing of what we're actually being shown. And I don't know that there is a right answer to what this book is trying to get across to the reader. So this is one of those really great sort of literary, introspective, yet fantastical books. And it's not proper like sorcery type magical fantasy, but everything is unreal. And there is even a couple spots where a unicorn shows up. So I was thinking, oh yeah, this is dreamlike, this is sort of magical realist fantasy almost, but then unicorn pops up. There's not a lot of that though. So I adored this. I do think Ben Okri is an author I'm definitely going to be picking up from more, both because the plot here was phenomenal. The prose, though, was the real standout. And I think when you're reading such a conceptual book like this, the prose has to stand out. So I want to give you a little sampling to take away with you, because this was great. The air was full of harmonies. He breathed them in. Elated with the harmonies in the air, he was surprised to find that it wasn't the buildings with their clarity of construction, their musical forms, their chaste pillars, and their ancient moods that so affected him. There was no denying the nobility of the tenements and the purity of the abodes. They made the spaces into something dreamlike. But what affected him the most as he went down the narrow streets were the myths and the magic in the air. All things invisible had a hidden glow to them. He sensed in that world something higher than marble and gold. He sensed a spirit of hidden light everywhere, concealed behind the mighty churches and the great basilicas of justice. The myths in the air made him feel as if they had left his body and entered a temple of world dreams. This was compounded by melodies heard and not located. It occurred to him that the city was composed of songs and that the stones were singing. It occurred to him that the marble facades and the radiant statues, the stained glass cathedrals and the merchant banks, the emporiums and the visible buildings of state, the yellow order of it all, and violet perfection of the streets had been erected, put in place, and shaped purely by music and by spirit. The other book that I read this week was actually a Star Trek fan fiction. And I guess I should start with methodology, because I'm not a huge fan fiction reader, and you also might not be, but I'm pretty good at using the internet. So what I did was, TV Tropes actually has long lists of recommended fan fiction. And so I used that as kind of my guideline to find, because they have the recommendation like actually included there, so you can read sort of what it is and why it's being recommended. And so I found several that I really wanted to read like right away on that list. So that was a great resource. Then there was the challenge of most of the ones I actually wanted to read are not widely available anymore, or have been taken down actually. And the one that I really settled on that like I just had to read it was one of those. So I actually wound up reading this on the Wayback Machine, which is an archived website, because it was on fanfiction.net and it doesn't seem to be there anymore. And so I will link that down below as well, because it is kind of hard to get to this story unless you kind of know what you're doing. So what I read is Star Trek Lost in the Woods by Ardwolf. And the reason that I picked this one, you will understand immediately. This is a story where Q of Star Trek Next Generation, which is very much my Star Trek series. I think I've probably watched all of it when I was growing up. Q has an encounter with the Enterprise, and of course he is such a trickster. I love Q as a character. Like anytime he shows up was a favorite episode of mine. Because I adore trickster characters, and he's much more powerful than the people in the Starfleet, much more advanced in some way, and he's this trickster, so he always gets them into trouble. So he flings them off through space and time to another universe, and lo and behold, that universe is the universe of Firefly, the sort of space westerny show. So we have this encounter between Enterprise and the Firefly crew. It's brilliant. So we have two things I really love. I'm a huge fan of Firefly. So that drew me in. The Q aspect to this story drew me in. And I was incredibly surprised. I probably shouldn't have been, but I enjoyed this so much more than I expected. That aspect of the two crews was great. This being fan fiction, you need to see the characters you know, and definitely they were more solid and fleshed out as the characters that we know well in the Enterprise characters. The Firefly characters, I think it relied a lot more on portraying their accents and stuff to get across what character we were talking about than mannerisms and all of that. But that was fantastic, and that's kind of the first part. However, then we get into the conundrum of why Q has thrown them there and kind of the problem that he has set them there for. Because of course he has to do that. Like, it's not just that he flung them away for no reason. He has very deep reasons behind everything he does usually. And so there is this big, difficult situation. There are some serious discussions about the Prime Directive. And so there was a lot more to this than the goofy space story that I was kind of expecting out of it. There is definitely some depth there to the plot and the discussions that are being had. I also thought it was so well done that we are talking about two different spacefaring kind of cultures or universes that are at totally different technology levels. So that was a huge part of this, was sort of not just the wonder of the Firefly crew seeing all the shiny things, but them having to deal with those technological differences. And also some, kind of aside about the Prime Directive is them talking about how much can we reveal to these people who have no idea about these technologies, that kind of thing. But we see them come together as two crews, and initially a little bit grudging or maybe distrustful with each other, but the sort of growth of the communication between them was wonderful. And it was just so fun to be back with these characters that, I know and are familiar. And so that draw of fan fiction was exactly what I wanted out of it. So this was great. It delivered on every level. There was pretty much nothing bad about it. It is a novella length, so it could have been longer, but I feel like this executed very, very well in the length. It was great. So I highly recommend this if you're looking for some Star Trek fan fiction for Book Trek still, because that is why I did pick this up. I picked it up for the readathon on Book Trek. So I do think there is another Ardwolf story that is also a crossover. I don't know if it's linked in some way, but I think there is another fanfic by Ardwolf that's sort of similar, so I will be trying to check that out if I get time later this month, because this was such a great time. The in progress pile remains mostly the same, so I am currently reading Letters to a Young Muslim by Omar, Sahif, Gobash. This will be finished this week, I'm sure. Ocean's Echo by Everina, Maxwell. I'm audiobooking it. This one has actually made good progress. I'm about 40%. Byzantium by Stephen Lawhead. A Slice Falling Books. A Slice of Mars by Guerric, and Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles. So my pile is falling. Hang on. Okay, book pile managed. I think that's it for books. So life stuff. This week I went to the theater to see Kiki's Delivery Service, a Studio Ghibli film, because the Ghibli Fest is on with Phasm Events, so they're showing a bunch of Ghibli films, or all of the Ghibli films, in theaters right now. And I had a great time with it. It was fantastic with where I'm at with Japanese. I've been avoiding subtitled stuff because of the fact that, like, I've put so much effort in, but I have so far to go that I knew it would be kind of frustrating to watch anything. And this was both affirming and a little frustrating with how far I have to go. I couldn't really understand any large sections, but I was picking up a word every 2 or 3 lines, and that was really good. And I could see, especially exclamations are very obvious and easy to tell what they're saying in comparison to the translation. So like catching differences was really fun. So that was a great experience, but it's just a fabulous movie. I had forgotten how adorable Gigi is, and he reminds me immensely of a foster kitten that I had a couple of years ago, in I think 2021, because I had 3 little black kittens that I actually have a video on socializing them because they were semi-feral. So I'll link the video and I'll try and remember to put a picture up here so you can see, but he's the most adorable little, like, pointy-eared tiny guy. So Gigi was a delight. What else went on this week? I don't think anything major this week for life stuff, and I think that was the only thing that I actually watched to finishing was that movie. So otherwise, recommendations, I have a discussion that I watched with Kate Elliott and Melinda Lowe. Melinda Lowe obviously is, wildly famous across BookTube for Last Night at the Telegraph Club, but she has some other books, and she discussed a thriller that she wrote that I have never heard of before this, and really got me interested in reading that one. And Kate Elliott writes big epic fantasy and is kind of at the head of SFWA, the Science Fiction Writers of America, I think, or Association. I don't know. But SFWA is the channel that this discussion was on, so she does host regularly. So that was a great, really enjoyable discussion. And then the other was a author event at one of the bookstores here. Keenan Oren is a he's younger than me, at least, Turkish American, kind of discovering his own Turkish background. And he wrote a collection of short stories inspired by that called I Am My Country, about his experiences of really digging into research about Turkish history, his journey there, and visiting Istanbul and really getting to know the location was really fascinating to hear him talk about. But then this is a fictional like collection of stories, so he's inspired by things that have happened in history or by political events in reality and mythology in the background of Turkish culture. So a lot of really interesting things he discussed that I loved. And there was a shop cat at the store, and the cat spent a good time around on the camera. So you'll get to enjoy some cameos from the shop cat if you watch this. But really great, and absolutely sold me on picking up his book whenever I can get to it, whenever I've got a little less on my to-read pile. So I think that is it for my week this week. I hope you've had a great reading week, just like I have, and I have a 3-day weekend, so I'm gonna get a lot of reading done. I'm about to go clean out a closet though, so hopefully that will get some good audiobooking time in. Thank you all so very much for watching. Is life pretty hard for Aru? Well, you got the hardest life, buddy. What's going on? You haven't been fed at all today? Is that what's up? Take you on. Good job. What? Silly boy.